Welcome to the WCEG Network on the WCEG Talk Radio. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. I'm Dr. Babs, your show host for this evening segment on the Holistic Perspective Show. I'm so excited that we have such an empowering session today. We're going to talk about mental health. But before we get to that, I hope your week has been great and all is well with you and yours. As usual, it's a time of experience where we just talk about all things related to health-related matters. Before we get started, I want to implore you, if you could just send out a tweet, tag your friends, your neighbors. We want to get healthier together. Let them know that we're live on all your social media handles, YouTube, Facebook, even the WCEG Talk Radio Network. We appreciate your time and your support. Now, I do have two announcements before we get started, and I introduce my wonderful guest co-host. There are two announcements. First is that the views that are shared by either myself or a guest, it's not necessarily those of our network, the WCEG Network. It's just our views, and it's all really to support your health and wellness. And nothing we say should be constituted as your patient or doctor relationship. It's really just to support your overall wellness. So as I said, I'm super pumped to share this platform with my amazing guest co-host, Dr. Marietta H. As we dive into our topic today, ongoing wellness practices for optimal mental health. As we all know, October is that month where we talk about breast awareness, but it's also that month where we talk about emotional wellness. So we're going to dive into what emotional wellness means, what mental health means, best practices, and then our commonly asked questions. So please, we just employ your engagement and your questions, so send them in. So I would love to get started as I give a brief introduction of my guest co-host. Dr. Marietta H is an associate professor and director of behavioral medicine within the Department of Family Medicine at Morehouse School of Medicine, and she has a secondary appointment within psychiatry and behavioral sciences. So we work together, and she's such a wonderful mentor. I'm really excited that we get to share this platform together. She provides a lot of psychological services for underserved youth and adults, and just published several articles in peer-reviewed journals where she talks about just quality mental health interventions for the underserved community. And she's co-authored a wonderful book that I would love to hear more about it. And it's titled A Child's Story About Racial Injustice, one that I've read, and we'll definitely tie it into mental health and how we can just ensure that we're providing optimal growth in a holistic perspective. So without further ado, I welcome Dr. Collins. Thank you for being my co-host today on the Holistic Perspective Show.
I'd like to say good evening to everyone, and thank you so much, Dr. Babs, for inviting me. Certainly as colleagues, we interact not often enough is what I'll say, but I've always admired you and admired not only you as a physician, but also your holistic perspective in terms of health and mental health. So I'm very excited to be here this evening.
Thank you. So, we want to hear a little bit more about just the passion, where it all comes from. You've done so much work in the mental health arena to the extent that you've written papers, you've even written a book. And we want to just harness a little bit about where that all started. So if you don't mind sharing that with us, and we'll definitely take it on, just diving into what we have for today.
Sure. Where did it all start? That's a great question. As I think about when I first decided really that I wanted to be a psychologist, I go back to my early childhood, okay? I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. I don't know if you've heard this story or not before, Dr. Babs, but I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and I was a little girl, or around maybe 11 or 12 when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot, okay? As the youngest of 12 kids, that really did impact me, and impacted me a whole lot. I had my older sis who really marched with Dr. King prior to his assassination. And one thing we talked about in my home was the importance of taking care of each other, of having even good mental health practices back then, even though the time was very stressful. So that really began a journey for me, with me developing a listening ear for people who came and talked to me for a variety of reasons about different issues, be it, personal issues, or even as a high schooler and a college student, health issues.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness, that's lovely. I love to hear that, where the whole journey, the genesis of the passion. And I know working with you, I see how you're passionate about just mental health, student development, all of that together. So it's lovely. So, this month of emotional wellness, we've just gone through so much, as you can imagine, going from the pandemic, and then there's this question about, are we in a recession? And, there's shooting, there's all of that. Our health is all, compromised at some point or the other. From your expertise, we definitely want to just hear some of those tips. I know you do have a presentation that you want to use as a guide. So if I can go ahead and share that for you, would that be a great segue to having those conversations started?
That certainly would. That certainly would be a great segue.
All right. So there we have it. Let's get it.
Right. What I did was to look at presentations that I've done in the past and try to choose some slides which I thought I could talk, freely about. So why don't we go on with the first slide? And I'm certainly going to try my best not to be lectury at all, because this is the evening. I want to relax. I want you to relax, and I want my audience to really be able to get into the presentation here. So as this slide indicates, life really is a balancing act. If you think about it, we're all juggling so many things. There's family, there's career, there's health, and there are even friendships. And it's really all a balancing act. We see this elephant trying to stand on one leg here, trying to balance all of those things. I really kind of think about all the demands that we have on our lives as people trying to stay afloat in a swimming pool, juggling lots of these balls. So life is, in fact, a balancing act. And when one or more of these balls become too heavy, that's when there's the imbalance. And that's when, it's time to take action so that we can, again, regain a balance, so that we can have an optimal life.
Yes.
Okay. And, this is basically, I included this slide just to let you guys know there are certainly different kinds of models of what is wellness, different models. This is one that I think is pretty simplistic, but it also does really capture pretty much everything. Because here you see there's the emotional well-being, occupational health plays a role in it, the physical health, something that Dr. Babs talks a lot about, spiritual health, intellectual health, as well as social health. So these are some of the dimensions related to wellness that I think are important for us to consider.
Yes, definitely a holistic approach, right? Because you can't have one aspect and the other aspect in sync. Yeah, absolutely.
You certainly can. And, here in this wheel here, we see that you're in the middle of this wheel, okay? And, again, looking at the things that are really, demanding your attention. You see it can sometimes be very overwhelming. Again, the emotional, the physical, the intellectual, the spiritual, the social, cultural, occupational, environmental, all of those things. And, you're just one person. How are you supposed to be able, to balance all of these different components of wellness? And that's what I wanted us to talk about this evening. Next slide. Okay. All righty. So Dr. Babs, when you think about our wellness, what do you think of? What is your definition of wellness?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I've had to think about this myself when I wonder, or try my best to define the difference between health and wellness. So wellness for me, it's a dynamic process. It's ongoing. You never get to it on one particular moment. So it's evolving. It's just your state of being, where you are. So that's how I define it compared to health. When we talk about, how are you feeling in your joint, or how are you feeling, or in your, whether it's your heart, your chest, those different aspects, whether we're talking about blood pressure and, we're talking about diabetes or whatever those symptoms are in terms of health, but wellness is just the dynamic overall well-being.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's certainly, you almost, stole a part of what my slide is going to say. But if you just touch it one more time, one of the things that
Yes.
I think is integral to this understanding, it's an active process.
Right,
Okay.
right.
It's really a decision that you as an individual must make, to make choices that would help you to be able to live a healthy and fulfilling life. It's not about, well, I'm just going to hope that, if I do this or if I do that, I'll have this balance that Dr. Collins is talking about. No, it's an active process with you making decisions that are important for you to make. Okay, would you hit it again, please? And it's also the dynamic. No, go ahead. Okay, right there. Thank you. And it is the dynamic process that you just mentioned, Dr. Babs. And that's one of the things that I try and talk to. You mentioned that one of the things that I do at the Edinburgh School of Medicine is I work with our residents. That's one of the things that I try and stress with them, because these are family medicine residents who certainly know all there is to know about physical health. But, trying to get them to move away from the medical model to a more holistic approach is one of the things that I really stress in my time with them. So it's a dynamic process of growth and change, wellness is. But what's really important is that it's a decision that you have made yourself to become aware of making choices that would make your life more balanced, more happy. Okay. And
Yes.
move on to
Very
the
good.
next one. And the goal is certainly not to have a life that's out of balance. And I'm sure that many of you guys can identify with at least one of these items that I put on this slide. Chronic stress, anger, being disillusioned. There's racism, sexism, and ageism, as we all know about, feeling powerless, pain, from different physical illnesses, feelings of guilt. What I was thinking about in terms of wellness, Dr. Babs, is during the pandemic, of course, there was increased needs for mental health services. I mean, I was busy. I was so busy that I did not take time to take care of myself. So I became overwhelmed. I became stressed. And what I decided to do was to make some changes in my life. And one of the changes that I did was to decide I can't be a psychologist to everybody. I can't take care of everybody, at Morehouse and my family and my faith community, my church, if I wanted to, and other people in general. So I decided to step back and say, what is it that you need to do, Marietta, so that you can take better care of yourself? And one of the things that I did was to decide to not work so hard, because I felt like my life was getting out of balance. I decided I can't do this. I can't work this hard and be able to have, to have wellness and good mental health. So I cut back my schedule as a way of taking care of myself and trying to restore that balance. And it's made a world of difference. I now have time to breathe. How about that? I also have time.
Amen to that.
Oh yeah. And I have time to exercise. Walking, that's an exercise that's important to me. That's, one of the things that the residents learn is that I try to practice what I preach. One of the things that's important in terms of good mental health is being able to certainly, figure out some time, carve out some time for yourself. And I think having some form of exercise is an integral part of that. The exercise doesn't have to be very stressful. And for me, it's walking. I like to walk. I like to go outside if it's not too hot, too cold, too rainy, and just put my mind in a relaxed state. And that's something that I really stress to my patients. And my residents will often say, are you still walking, Dr. Collins? Because I know that's what I do. I typically do that after work, or I try to do it before work, but that helps me to maintain good mental health.
Yes, I love that you say that, because you mentioned about being overwhelmed. You wanted to meet everyone at their own needs, and what happens to your own needs? It's just a matter of time. If you do not replenish, if you don't refill, it's going to overflow, and then you'll be left empty and dry. So I had to learn that too a few years back, when my tank was completely dry, and I realized that you can't be everything to everyone. And so to our listeners, it's now that we have to be reflective. We don't have to wait for a pandemic or situations like that for us to take a seat back and say, you have to love yourself. And loving yourself is not selfish. I also had to learn that it's
Yes.
about caring for yourself and being in that place where you're filling your jar so that you can meet other people's needs. Of course, yours first and foremost. So I like that you were able to do that and show up at your best when you do that, right?
Oh,
So
yes, for sure. And I like what you said about loving yourself. It's not selfish. That's one of the things that, again, I do, as women, as Black women, as African American women, as, women in general,
yes.
one of the things that we struggle with is trying to feel comfortable prioritizing ourselves and our own needs. We take care of everybody else and we put ourselves last. And that's not good for us.
Yeah.
So being, so being willing to take a step forward and say, hey, I deserve a little time for myself. It's okay for me to, have a girls' night out if I want to. It's okay for me to take a bubble bath, and that's not being selfish when I say no to my husband, no to my partner, no to my kids. This is what I need to do so that I can take care of myself and so my life does not get out of balance.
Yes, yes. And something that brings to mind is, the tendency where we feel that, oh, but we have the culture where we're expected to overachieve and be so
Yes.
hardworking. And if you say you're doing nothing, it feels like you're lazy. I used to tell my husband, it was so funny, that how can you be sleeping at 2 p.m. in the afternoon? That's not, you got to be accomplishing something. And his mind, no, that is part of me being productive. And I used to think that, no, there's just no way. And I think that's the culture we have, but we do need to really sit back and realize, even as women, that it's okay. Yes. I mean, you can be a high achiever person, but it's not possible to have it all at the same time, because something is going to, at the end of the day, be lacking. So if you don't have that balance in place and you're just trying to do everything, you will automatically burn out if you don't give time for rest. So I like that you have these demonstrations of how it can present, because unless people see it, they won't realize that that's really what's going on. Because in my practice, and I'm sure in yours, majority of what patients come in with symptoms is really because of the chronic stress and the life being out of balance. And if you get to the root cause of the problem, then we're not needing multiple medications to mask what the real problem is. But that's great. I'm glad you mentioned these.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And my last few slides are really just like a kind of like a goal setting wellness check, just kind of based upon what you know about yourself, or what this is triggering for yourself. What can you do to try to improve your life balance? So I intend to improve my life balance by what? These are just 1, 2, 3, 4 simple questions. Okay. And my first step will be, it could be I want to improve my life balance by taking some time for me. Could be I'm going to journal. I'm going to start to journal. Okay. That might be my first step. I want to share my plans with a person who's going to, support you by saying, and hopefully that can be a partner, that can be a family member, that can be a friend. And then I'm going to review my progress on this date to see, if in fact I am able to adhere to and keep my wellness goals. Okay. And these things will change over time, but these are 4 simple steps, which I think, anybody can do to, as a way to get started with learning how to set goals for your own personal wellness. Okay. And these are just some strategies that I've talked about a lot. I just mentioned keeping a journal. That's certainly, I think, an important step. And one thing I talk about a lot in my sessions is the power of positive thinking, because, one of the things that depression does is it really bombards our minds with negative thoughts. And whereas anxiety had, your mind could even be racing. What if? Is there a way we can slow down and focus on positive thinking as opposed to negative or anxiety provoking things? And we can do that through visualization. You can think about what is a place that I can think of where I've been and where I want to go, where everything can be more relaxing. It could be a beach, a sunny beach, could be when I was a kid playing around, riding a bike with friends, but certainly, trying to figure out how can I visualize a way to take care of myself? What can I do to positively enforce reinforce these behaviors that I'm trying to adopt. And, certainly, and, participating in pleasurable activities is really important. Find something that you like to do that brings you pleasure. It may not bring your whole family pleasure, and it may not even be something that your whole friendship group participates in. But what is something that you can do that brings you pleasure and that is reinforcing for you? And to, be resilient, and I tell my patients all the time, well, life is full of ups and downs. If you think about it, it's kind of like a roller coaster. Some days is up, some days, you might be going down, and it's about taking it one step at a time. And you could always reset. Dr. Collins, well, today I wasn't able to make healthy choices, when I went out to eat. So I wasn't able to do that, or I feel so bad about myself, I'm never going to make this change. Oh no, tomorrow's another day. We're going to reset. We're going to reset and take it one day at a time, one step at a time. And what's most important is that you don't give in. You don't give in to let depression, anxiety, life stresses overwhelm you. You recommit to making a choice to find that balance in your life. And you may have to continue to try to do that time and time again, but you'll get it if you have that determination to do so. And I think that should hopefully be about my last slide. And it is that you are accountable for your own wellness. So remember that.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much. Not only did you give us this great nuggets, but you shared it on a personal note, what happened to you. And because I wondered, I know that there was a time your hours changed, but I had no idea it had anything to do with that. I thought maybe you just had other ventures because, you're a superwoman. You have different, different ambitions and stuff. So I thought that was what it was, but it's good to hear now that that was really you taking care of yourself so you can show up as your best self.
Exactly.
That's so important. That's so important. So thank you for sharing all of those. It makes me recall a statement that my former chair said many years ago during our evaluation. I don't know if you remember him, Dr., or if you were in the department, Dr. What is his name again? Oh my goodness, Dr. Struthers. Were you in the department with Dr. Struthers?
No, but I've heard of things about him. I
asked him once. I was like really young faculty member, and oh my goodness, I was struggling because I consider myself a multi-passionate person, and my husband calls me jumpy, that I jump. I have all sorts of ideas, And so I asked him. I had two toddlers. Well, I believe at the time 6-year-old and 3.
Wow.
And I said, I don't know how to balance. Do you have any advice for me? That was my only question for him. When he said, what do you have any questions? Anything I can do? Everything looks good. Just keep doing what you're doing. And I said, I am so out of balance. Do you know how I can be balanced? And you know what he said to me? When you figure it out, let me know. I've been in this business for so many years and I still don't know. The moment he said that, I was like, wow. This is something we're all figuring out day by day. You said it. It's an ongoing thing, like in the definition of wellness. It's constant and it changes. You might have figured it out and then something happens and you readjust. And I think that's what life is all about. There's no perfect arrival, so it's ongoing. And I recently have heard terminologies like harmony. So sometimes they say, not even referring to the word balance, because maybe there's just never a balance. It's just harmony. How do you adjust and pivot from day to day? So, great.
I like
awesome.
That. Yeah. It suggests that dynamic process that we talked about earlier, harmony.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yes. Yeah. And then you also gave these action steps, which makes it very simple. What can I start with first? Because that could also be overwhelming where you're like, okay, where do I start? There's so much. And I know that I go into what they call just paralyzed overload. There's just so much and you don't know which one to start, but you said it very nicely in your outline. And so for our listeners, where do you feel the pressure? Is it in terms of symptoms? are you feeling a headache and you just don't know where it's starting from? Are you feeling joint aches? You're just feeling just out of ease. You just know something is not right. And you might have spoken to your provider, your physician, and sometimes they might, Dr. Collins is an expert. She will definitely ask you if you're stressed and all of that. But depending on what your visit is like, if you have other things that you're seeing your doctor for, they might not necessarily ask about your stress levels. But you haven't heard this, or you have family members that you can share with, do that inventory and be true to yourself. Do you think something is triggering this? Do you take time to rest, really sleep? Because that's one of the things that would definitely decrease your high cortisol level, which is a hormone that is increased amounts, the fight or flight hormone. So if we take that inventory, then we can actually pay attention to how we're feeling and why we're feeling that way, and then take the next step as to how can you carve out time, no matter how busy you are, for self-care. And of course, all the examples. I started journaling, and I don't know what your experience is with journaling, but it really makes a big difference. It helped me when I was in medical school. That was how I survived medical school, journaling. But during residency, I lost that. I guess residency was just it was like always on the go. So I stopped doing it, and I felt it in my health. So journaling, it's like a brain dump. It just put it down on paper. Do you have experience with that, Dr. Collins? I know you like to walk, but do you also journal as well?
I do. I journal as well. It's interesting. I was thinking, I guess something else you probably don't know about me, because when I came on to faculty at Morehouse, my kids were grown up, but I had both of my children when I was in graduate school. I was in graduate school, and my daughter is now, all grown up. I think you may have met her. She's in medical school now herself. And one thing she reminds me to do all the time is to journal. I had such a rough day. Mom, you need to journal about that. She need to journal about that, So for sure, journaling is so helpful. It's just so helpful. And I even tell my patients who have difficulty with sleep because they have racing thoughts, just keep a piece of paper by the side of your bed, write down those things that you're thinking that I gotta do this, what if this, write them down, and there they are. They're out of your mind. You can pick it up in the morning and start over again if need be. But hopefully you'll get some release by just writing it down, getting it outside of your head, knowing you're not going to forget it because you wrote it down. It's right there.
Yes, absolutely. And that's exactly what it does for me. So I tend to do it more at night, but I hope, I would love to make it a regular practice in the morning as well, to set my intention for the day. You said something about affirmation. Oh my goodness, I love affirmation. So I love it because, our mindsets, the brain is really the center of it all. And if I could use a scripture from the Bible, as the man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So the words matter, and if we don't cultivate those positive thinking words,
I would agree.
Whatever it is we're expecting our lives to look like, if it doesn't align with our words and our mindset, there's going to be an out of balance. So definitely encourage our listeners, even if you have to write it down somewhere, to reassure yourself and reaffirm yourself, because we can easily forget, have a rough day. You forget those things.
And this reminded me of some journaling prompts that I sometimes share. If you don't mind, I can
please.
Now, because sometimes, I'll say to my patients, let's try journaling. And I don't know what to say, Dr. Collins. How do you even get started journaling? I have no idea. And I don't want to just focus on the things that are making me upset. What is it that I do? And so I just have a couple of prompts that, sometimes people might find to be helpful. So what you could start, you might want to say, what habit did I curb today? Not what habit did I stop? What habit did I fix? No, what did you curb? So that's curbing is just a little bit of progress we're talking about. It's come to your awareness, and you are working on making whatever adjustment it is you feel you need to meet. So you can write about that. What habit did I curb today? And how am I better? How am I better today? Okay. So what is better about me today? It could be that I'm taking this time now to journal. That's one thing that's better. It is that I'm not being so hard on myself. We have a tendency to be too hard on ourselves. Our expectations could just be way too high. I was able to adjust my expectations a little bit, and to hug myself, to be more
Yes,
accepting of
yes,
myself
yes.
for sure. And where are my actions just? Where in my life are my actions just? And how can I improve? And again, we're just talking about simple things, okay?
Yeah.
Um, what contributed to my happiness today? How about that one? What contributed to my
Yes,
happiness
of
today?
course.
And what distracted me from appreciating that?
Hmm.
What distracted me from appreciating it? And what are 5 things you have to be grateful for? There's 5 things you have to be grateful for. Sometimes I'll have my patients have like a gratitude journal. They may have when they wake up in the morning, these are 3 things that I'm grateful for. These may be 3 things I'm working on. Let's look at it again at night. How did you do with those 3 things? And
Yes.
there's some things that you list that can really kind of help you to just again get through this thing we call life in a way that's as healthy and helpful and with as much harmony as
Yes.
possible. As
Yes.
possible.
Yeah, definitely. Identifying those small wins, no matter how
Uh-huh.
small they are, the
Mhm.
small ones are going to form a big bucket of bigger wins. So
Oh, yes.
definitely identifying those wins. And I love that you said that because it reminded me of what I tend to write in my journal, which is 3, 2, 1. So
Ah,
3 things that I'm grateful for, because
that's
there's just
great.
something about
That's
when you're
great.
grateful that
That's
turns
great.
that emotional
Great. That's
overwhelm
great. That's
into a
great.
state of ease and calm. So 3 things I'm grateful for, 2 things I'm looking forward to, because
Mhm.
when we look forward to things, when we see a direction for our lives, then we don't stay hopeless. We stay in a state of just expectation. So 3 things I'm grateful for, 2 things I'm hopeful for. And then 1 thing, what can I do
Yeah.
to make that happen? And why I say what can I do and not what that person can do,
Right.
it's
Exactly.
because I can only control what I can control, or
Mhm.
I can't control any
Mhm.
human being.
Mhm.
We're
Mhm.
all wonderfully and fearfully made, as I say in my home. I can't even control my kids. I could tell them what to do, but
Uh-huh.
I can't
Uh-huh.
control anyone, not even my husband. So what can I do to add to my overall action goal? And that helps me very much. So, and those are my prompts. So I like that you shared yours. I'm hoping
Thank
that
you.
our listeners, if they're not already doing this, that they will, pick up on 1 or 2 of them and
Yeah.
add
Yeah.
that into their, emotional wellness, bucket, where they just, aim for victory every day. And
Mhm.
this thing that we call life, like you
Oh, yeah.
said.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh,
Yes,
yes.
absolutely. Now, I want to ask a question about breathing, because breathing is so instrumental to our emotional wellness. I know it helps me quite a bit. I was surprised to learn that when I was told breathing, the different types of breathing, I was like, I'm breathing already. What do you mean breathing? But the issue is that we actually don't take in depth breathing. So
Mhm.
breathing
Mhm.
actually takes us into what we call the parasympathetic mode. So it's the rest and digest, compared to the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight, which we tend to be quite a bit. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being in that state, but we're not meant to stay in that state long term, because then we have prolonged levels of cortisol in our bloodstream. So again, let's say I have a project, I get, the adrenaline rush and all of that to get it accomplished. Or maybe if danger is here, the changes occur, sweaty palms, blood pressure raised, all of that, for me to be able to meet the needs at that current moment. But when we're overwhelmed with everything that you just described so well, we stay in that fight or flight mode. So what happens is that we're not breathing in depth. So it's just shallow
Mhm.
breathing. I mean, the way we all breathe. But when we take a pause and intentionally breathe, we're breathing from the diaphragm, and we get into a more restful state. So there's several forms of breathing, which I've since learned. The most common one is the box breathing, and it's one that I try my best to do, especially at noon. So I have an alarm on my phone at noon,
Okay.
and it just prompts me to breathe, because I don't know if you've ever experienced when you have a lot of things to do, you're just moving up and down. But then at noon, when I get the alarm, I'm stopping, pausing to breathe. So what the box breathing is, it's like a square, right? And it's 4 inhale, with a hold for 4, and then you exhale for 4 and you pause for 4. So I would love for us, I think we have a few more minutes before I go into our commonly asked questions. It would be nice to give it a try and see if you like it and if you think it made any difference. So this is how we're going to do it. Again, you will just relax. You can close your eyes, you can keep them open. Just be upright, and what I will do is just in your mind, I'll softly count for 4. You can do 4 rounds, but the first time you're going to hear my voice, and subsequently you would do it yourself and you would just count in your head. So we'll go ahead and start. So inhale for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to be silent and we'll do 2 rounds on our own. One more set. Inhale for 4. Okay. How did that feel, Dr. Collins?
It felt wonderful. It felt so wonderful. I decided I was going to just put my mic on mute so that I could really get into it. Thank you. I've never heard of that one. I'm going to certainly try doing that. I like it.
Yes, there's several. That's the most common one, called the box breathing. There's some also called the 4-7-8, and I'll circle back and put the different pictures because I'm a visual person. So I'll put the pictures of the different types of breathing, but it really takes you into that restful place. And it's recommended if you fall asleep and you're like me, if I drink my water towards the end of the day and I get up at night, it actually gets you back in that sleeping realm so that you're not tossing and turning. It helps with anxiety, it helps with just grounding yourself, putting yourself back, into that calm state. So breathing is definitely one of those things that we can keep in an asana to help us with emotional well-being.
Oh, yes, for sure. As psychologists, we stress progressive muscle relaxation, which is the deep breathing, from the top of your head to the tip of your toes, So certainly these are some really good techniques that sound so interesting to learn. So I'm really excited about them. So thanks for sharing them.
Yes. So before we get into the commonly asked questions, and maybe you might have some commonly asked questions, I'm hoping that some questions might come in and we can just dive into them. I know that I've heard people say that there's a lot of shame around feeling that you need to take time off for emotional well-being. Someone had mentioned to me a few days ago where somebody had to get permission to have an emotional wellness day. And I was curious. I'm like, why didn't you just say you took the day off? Why do you have to emphasize what it's for? Can you share some light? What are your thoughts about that? Or what can you say to listeners that there's no shame in seeking your own well-being? And how can we address that culture where you have to give an explanation? Because you're quite aware of how many, let's not even begin to talk about suicide that happened during the pandemic, or healthcare providers, and not just healthcare, but just generally. Can you just help us out with that? How can we?
Sure. It's about, us all, being, I guess, in this fast-paced world, this high-achieving world where you're not valued for who you are as much as you are for what you do, unfortunately. So people really feel the need to, I guess I'll say, compete and achieve and I guess that's an external thing as opposed to focusing on the internal. On the internal, what is my body saying to myself? What is it that I need? Why is it that I don't feel worthy, enough to say, hey, wait a minute, let me get off this merry-go-round for a minute. I need to refuel. I need to try and find my balance. I need to find that harmony. And this world is going to continue, but I need to take some time for me, and I don't need to explain it to anybody. This is just what needs to happen. This is how I'm taking care of me. This is what, I'm listening to what my body is saying, and this is what my body needs so that I can get back on that merry-go-round and be even more productive,
Yeah, and that's for adults. So, but what's about the youth, because I find my teenagers are just under so much pressure, and you've done lots of work in the underserved community with youth.
Yes.
How do you reach to that? How do you reach out to their inner core? Because there's peer pressure. I mean, when I was growing up, it's a whole lot different. I mean, there was peer pressure then, but there's nothing compared to what they're going through now. So to those people listening right now, and they have a teenager or they have a niece or a nephew, what can you say to that person right now that makes them know that they're valuable and they're loved? And it's not about what you own or what you don't have. Please tell us how do you dissect that for them?
Yes, certainly, you talk to these people, you talk to them and try and help them to realize that it's not about material things. Certainly a goal is to for some of us to go to college. That may not be the goal for everyone, and certainly when people start to try and plot out their lives down the road, you need to do X, Y, and Z to get in here. You have to look at, you have a portfolio? What does your application look like? Well, what's important to colleges is that they hopefully will see someone who's a well-rounded person, somebody who they know that if they are in an environment, they can cope because they have developed some adaptive strategies. So what are the things that bring you joy? What are the things that you would do if, like, first is my job. I would still do my job even if I didn't get paid, Dr. Babalola, because I love it. I love helping people. As you said, I'm passionate about it. It's very fulfilling for me. So what is it that brings you joy? What is it you would continue to do? That's why it's really important. I follow you on Facebook and Instagram, and I know that you and your family, you guys are involved in lots of physical activities. When my kids were little, we did the same thing. It wasn't that we wanted, my son to be the best tennis player and my daughter to be the best basketball player. We wanted them to find a sport that they enjoyed. Find something that you enjoy doing that you can continue doing for the rest of your life. And that's what each of them did. My son, he continues to play tennis. My daughter, she's about as tall as me. And I'm about maybe 5 feet on a good day. She played basketball and would get like best defensive player, this little thing. But she describes herself today as an athlete because that's what she likes to do. That helps her to balance. So, with parents, certainly you want the best for your children, but you also want to know that when they leave you, they have some skills. They have some coping skills. And you start to help them to develop that early on by, certainly not just pushing achievement, but how can you find, how are you going to know when you need to slow down? What is a consistent pattern that you can start to develop now in your life, for positive coping, so that when things get awry and we're not around, wait a minute, I need to step back and do this. I need to go for a run. I need to go for a walk. I need to journal. I need to just go laugh. I need to go laugh and have fun with some of my friends. I don't need to just make all A's all the time to do my best, but also kind of have that balance.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. I know this is definitely benefiting people that are listening, as it is benefiting me as well. And, it was just brought to my attention that, again, we know that Serena Williams and Simone Biles, they took time off. They were like, this might not be it after all. So please, it's not worth it. It's not really, yes, all the fame and all the money, but we know that if we leave this earth, life is going to continue. Nobody's going to pause. They might say a few words of prayer and all of that, but it continues. And, my son recently, my 11-year-old, I was working and he came to me and I was like, are you okay? He said, I'm okay. I just don't know what I want to become. And I was like, what do you mean? I thought you wanted to, he's always said he wants to be an engineer, and he knows what his sisters want to be because they've always known. I knew when I was 5 what I wanted to become, and nobody pressured me into it. And I love that. I admire that about my parents. But these day and age, there are homes where they insist that this is what you have to be.
Oh, yes.
So he came to me and he felt disappointed. And I told him, you have a lot of time to figure it out. Why are you swearing yourself now at 11? You will figure it out. And even if engineering is not what you want to do, that's fine. You will figure it out. Don't put pressure on yourself. It's like, oh, some kids in class already know. Our journeys are all unique. We're our own competition and not with anybody else. And that's why I try to emphasize to my kids as well. And even to myself, I have to remind myself anytime I want to get into that comparison state, which we all know, comparison is they say this thief, right? It steals all our joy. So we do need to maintain that joy within. So I'm glad that you emphasize just your, how you raised your kids and how youth today should affirm themselves. Really affirm yourself. You are beautiful. You're just the way you are. And even for adults, we need to remind ourselves that we're our own competition and no one else, and identify when it's time to pause, read, do whatever it is you need to get yourself back in place. So awesome. This has made some really fantastic conversations. Well, I just have 2 questions, commonly asked questions, and now I would love for you to share about your book. And I think we have about 10 minutes, so we'll do that really quick, but this has been amazing. So the 2 commonly asked questions I've had patients ask me about just mental health, their foods that they can eat to keep them calm. I definitely know that there are foods that can keep you calm. I know there are foods that do the opposite. So if you're eating things that are a lot of processed foods, a lot of packaged foods, processed foods that have just salt and sugar, unhealthy oils, they really affects your gut microbiome. And what do I mean by that? So our colon, it's long, all the way from when we put food in our mouth, all the way to the colon, to the rectum. It's a long pipe, and it's lined with microbiomes, which are the bacteria, right? So good bacteria, bad bacteria. The good bacteria will actually give us those feel-good hormones. It helps to produce some of the serotonin. Now, if we're feeding the bad bacteria, which it loves to eat all the sugary foods, then we're not producing as much serotonin. Now, there is place for antidepressants. There's definitely room for all of those medicines. But if we are still eating unhealthy, taking antidepressants or any medication to calm us down, it's like you're just knocking, there's a good thing that you're taking, but you're combating it with things that are not helping. So definitely these are the things I encourage my patients to make sure as much as possible eating a well-balanced diet. So one high fiber diet, fruits and veggies that have all the nutrients, have all the real food that the bacteria loves to feast on, that will keep us in a good mental state. Another question is that I've had patients ask is more about what do they do in terms of routine? What kind of habits can they put in place? So Dr. Collins already alluded to that about just identifying one thing, even if it's one thing per week. Maybe you go for a 10 minutes walk. I go outside now for vitamin D, especially on days where I'm in clinic and I don't step out. And I miss that vitamin D. That vitamin D, I'm sure you can attest to that. It just just going outdoor, even if you're not walking long distance, just going out first thing in the morning, it helps to set your circadian rhythm so that you actually, your body is set and ready, charged with the vitamin D, with the fresh air, with, just all those little things are good routines to help your overall emotional wellness. So yes, that's what I have. So Dr. Collins, please, do you mind share with us your book, how we can, if for those that might want to read about it or share it with their families, or how people can get in touch with you and begin to wrap up.
Well, thank you so much for asking. I would just run over there and grab a copy of it for you, but the name of it is, as a matter of fact, I have 2 books that are out. The one I wanted to talk about is called Something Happened in Our Town, a child's story about racial injustice. And it's a book that I wrote with two of my friends who are all psychologists. And this is a book that really developed as a result of the shootings that were happening in our country of young Black boys, Black men, Black women, some girls even. And, we work with parents who, again, from underserved areas who were really impacted by this and didn't know how to have conversations with their children about it. So the book, really talks about, it's a storybook, and it's for children ages, I would say probably around 6 and up. Okay. And it's basically about a story of children who hear about a shooting of a Black man, an unarmed Black man by a white police officer, and they go home and talk to their parents about it. One child is white, one child is Black. And what we've been able to do is to talk about, the role of white Americans in terms of slavery, the role of Black Americans in terms of, 60s and protests, and how it's so important for us to try to work together to be more inclusive and not exclusive. The book became very, very popular right after the shooting of George Floyd, and ended up becoming a New York Times bestseller. And, we've talked about it, pretty much everywhere. And I can't think of a state that hasn't really been impacted. Wow. So we've talked to lots of different groups, both schools, churches, libraries, corporations even, who wanted us to kind of help them to equip their workers, with the words to tell their children about, these unfortunate shootings. One thing that's really important in the back of that book is a parent's guide, which, gives child-friendly definitions for parents, because, kids can just ask the darndest questions. They can ask you really hard questions. So we spend a lot of time trying to come up with different scenarios, so that parents would be equipped to kind of talk, to their children in a very non-threatening, very relaxed atmosphere. So, and again, talk about wellness is something that I do to balance, because I worked with children and adolescents for, a large part of my life. And I do know the needs of, parents have, when they struggle sometimes with how to talk to children about these difficult subjects. So my friends and I decided we would write our first book. It was very popular. So, we're glad that it's been so well received. And you can certainly get copies of it from, of course, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, as well as any other local bookstores. You can certainly contact Dr. Babs, who could contact me, and I could make sure you get a copy of it. But this has really been a life-changing experience for me and my colleagues. The book was so popular, as a matter of fact, that our children's theater company in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where George Floyd was killed, made a play based upon the book.
Oh, wow.
And isn't it something? And lots of schools brought their children, to see the play, so they could really stimulate conversation about this really difficult topic, very difficult topic. So,
yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing about the book and writing it with your colleagues. That's amazing. I know we got a copy, and my son enjoyed reading it. My daughters as well, but it really touched all of us. So we're definitely looking forward to a healthier world with mental health stability, right?
Yes.
That's so important for each and every one of us, young and old, regardless of your gender, your race, your ethnicity. That's what we're hoping for. So thank you so much, Dr. Collins. I really appreciate you for being a guest co-host, a wonderful guest co-host on the WCEG Network. Yes. So this has been wonderful. I've learned a lot, and I hope you all have as well. For our listeners, thank you so much for joining us as we've discussed ongoing wellness practices for optimal mental health. It's so important. Mental health matters. We can't decide. We got to take care of it, because that mental part takes care of everything else. It really does. You cannot isolate, as Dr. Collins said in The Whale, you can't isolate environment from, spirituality or your physical health. It's really something that we have to put together in sync. And I always like to leave, the session with a quote and action steps, because we know that information is nothing without implementation. So the quote that I want to share is by Matt Haig, and it says, "Mental health problems don't define who you are." So let's let that sink in. It doesn't define who you are. There's something you experience. You walk in the rain, you feel the rain, but you're not the rain. So I thought that hit me. I was like, wow, yeah,
Like that.
just because
I
I
like
just
that.
because I walk in the rain doesn't mean that all of a sudden rain, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So just because I'm
Yeah.
having a bad day, sometimes I used to, I mean, there were many years ago when I had my mental, when I was overwhelmed and I just couldn't figure it out. I used to think I was defined by how my day went. And I realized that no, some days, how they tell you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, so I realized that, okay, I just need to identify where those triggers are and
Yes.
approach it from there, but not define myself based on
Yeah.
how the day has been. So important. So action steps, again, pay attention to the words that we say to ourselves, right? We become who we say. Our mental health wellness begins with our mindset aligning with our words. So that's what we have for today. I look forward to seeing you all back for our next session in November. Until then, remember that you deserve to live healthy, vibrant, and just everything that involves being whole. You deserve it because you're certainly worth it. Great wishes to you and yours, and take care and God bless. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.